I'm sorry, Mom, but we don't serve people like you. Maybe the McDonald's down the street would suit you better." Lacey Monroe's voice cut through the grand hall of Elowen's table like a blade of ice. She tore the reservation confirmation in half, the crisp white paper fluttering to the marble floor like fallen snow. The entire space froze. Silverware stopped clinking. Conversations halted mid-sentence. A few phones emerged from luxury leather clutches, ready to capture every second of the humiliation unfolding. Camille Johnson stood still, her tall, elegant figure wrapped in a perfectly tailored navy blue blazer. Her face showed no emotion, but her slender fingers gently tapped the edge of her Hermes bag, the only signal that the fury inside was being held back. Lacey stepped closer, eyes feigning concern. "You understand, don't you? This restaurant has its own standards." Camille gave a faint smile, just enough to sharpen her features. "Standards?" she echoed with an eerie calm. "Have you ever been judged solely by how you look, before anyone even knows who you are?" No one in the restaurant yet realized that just 20 minutes earlier, Camille had confirmed her reservation through the app. The email was still there, glowing clearly on her iPhone screen. 8:15 p.m., table for 2. A timestamp no one could deny. 7:42 p.m. Camille held the phone out for Lacey to see, but she only glanced at it and shrugged. "Must be a system error. We're fully booked through the end of the year." Camille looked past her, into the restaurant. At least 6 tables sat empty, gleaming with white linens and neatly placed wine glasses. The space, built to hold 80 guests, had barely 30. "What about those tables?" Camille asked, her voice soft as air, but heavy with weight. Lacey folded her arms and stood firm in the entrance. "They're reserved for regulars, people who fit the atmosphere here." Her words sounded polite, but Camille had heard them her entire career, from executive boardrooms to elite private clubs, where discrimination hides behind language dressed up as standards. "We have standards," a smooth, almost artificial male voice interrupted. Ethan Blake, the assistant manager, stepped out from behind the bar with a polished corporate demeanor and an unsettlingly cold stare. It took him only 3 seconds to scan Camille, her hair, her skin, and the Cartier Santos peeking out from beneath her sleeve. Judgment rendered instantly. "Is there a problem here?" Ethan asked, smiling with his mouth, but not his eyes. "No problem at all," Camille replied, her gaze locked on his. "I'm simply waiting for the table I reserved." The air thickened. All eyes in the restaurant turned toward the front desk, where the quiet tension was slowly catching fire. Not far away at table 9, Talia Chen, a well-known food blogger with over 200,000 followers, had just set her pen down. She was no stranger to scandal, but rarely did it unfold so vividly in front of her. With a swipe, she switched her phone to Instagram Live. "Hey everyone, it's Talia. I'm at Elowen's table and just witnessed something seriously off." Viewer count climbed. 47, 89, 156. The numbers spread like wildfire. Ethan stepped beside Lacey, forming a human wall. "Ma'am, we kindly ask that you leave to maintain the standards of this establishment." "Standards?" Camille repeated, this time without hiding the fatigue in her voice. She glanced at her watch. 8:02 p.m. Interesting choice of words. Her phone buzzed gently in her hand. Caller ID, Everett & Partners, Goldman Sachs Investment Division. Camille declined the call without looking. Something more important was unfolding here. "Listen, sweetheart," Lacey said, lowering her voice in that intentional whisper meant for the whole room to hear. "This place isn't for food stamps, okay? There's an Applebee's near the mall. Might be more your speed." The restaurant collectively held its breath, an invisible slap, sharp and stinging. Camille didn't flinch. She didn't react. Only her fingers moved, brushing the edge of her handbag where a black American Express Centurion card gleamed, a symbol of elite wealth. No limits, no explanations. "I'll wait exactly 10 minutes, Camille said evenly. "My partner is on the way. If you want to handle this professionally, this is your final chance." Ethan stepped closer, breaching her personal space. "You need to understand, this is a place with a reputation. Our guests expect a certain kind of environment." The words were carefully chosen. But Camille knew the disguise too well. Discrimination no longer hid. It was now dressed in polite phrases and disdainful glances. Talia whispered to the camera, "If you're watching this, share it. This is what it's like for a woman of color walking into a high-end restaurant. Do not stay silent." Viewers, 408. And rising. Camille checked her watch again. The minute hand had just ticked to 8:03 p.m. Phones were no longer confined to Talia's table. They were now visible at nearly every table with guests under 50. A few older patrons sat still, their expressions tense. The sommelier froze mid-pour, the wine glass left unfilled. "Call security," Ethan whispered to Lacey, low but loud enough for Camille to hear. "If she doesn't leave." Camille didn't turn around. She simply smiled. Nearby, Marcus Hill, a young security staffer, pretended to wipe down the host stand. His eyes kept darting between Camille and the two managers. His expression said it all. He'd seen scenes like this before, but never anything that escalated quite like this. 8 minutes left, Camille said softly, still calm, as if counting down to something much bigger. Lacey leaned on the counter, her voice dripping with mockery. "I honestly don't understand why people like you keep trying to squeeze into places like this. There's an Applebee's near the mall. Much more fitting." Her words tore the room in half. At table 6, an elderly couple looked at each other, confused. The husband put down his napkin, his eyes filled with quiet indignation. At the next table, a young businessman raised his phone and began filming openly. Even the sommelier, who normally only cared about temperature and tannins, froze, eyes locked on Camille. Her handbag rested on the host stand. Inside, a first-class Emirates boarding pass remained neatly tucked away. Dubai to JFK, seat 2A. A flight from 3 days ago. A ticket that cost more than a server's monthly salary. "Ethan," Camille said, her voice now taking on a colder edge. "Before you go any further, I want you to ask yourself something." "What's that?" he replied, defiant. "Do you have any idea who you're speaking to?" The question was like a thin blade, gliding slowly across the surface of arrogance. Ethan laughed, a sharp, mocking laugh. "You think you're Oprah Winfrey or something? This is our restaurant, and you're not welcome here." Camille tilted her head slightly. Then she pulled out her phone and typed a short sequence. "Confirm. Activate Protocol 7. Immediate deployment." The reply came almost instantly. "Understood. ETA. 2 minutes." 7 minutes, Camille whispered, slipping the phone back into her bag. Her eyes now gleamed like a freshly honed blade. Outside the tall glass windows, A black Escalade remained parked, engine still running. Inside, shadows began to shift. Talia's live stream had passed 800 viewers. The hashtag had Elowen's discrimination was gaining traction. Camille remained still, like a statue. But anyone perceptive enough would see she was now in full control of the entire room. The headlights from the black Escalade outside the glass facade cast flickering beams across the mirrored wall, signaling that something was coming. Inside, the air grew thick. The office door swung open. A silver-haired man in a dark grey suit stepped out, each stride deliberate and commanding. Gerald Huxley, the general manager of Elowen's table for the past 12 years, appeared like a storm front, carrying the full weight of the system he had meticulously built. He didn't need to say much to capture the restaurant's full attention. "What's going on here?" Gerald asked loudly, his voice echoing through the dining room like a gavel striking marble. Ethan straightened immediately, as if rescued. "Sir, this guest refused to leave, even though she doesn't have a reservation. We checked the system. There's no matching name." Gerald turned his eyes toward Camille. The assessment lasted barely 2 seconds, but in that brief moment, he took everything in: her skin, the Hermes bag, the unshakable composure, the gaze of someone long accustomed to judging by appearances. "Ma'am," Gerald said, his tone seemingly polite, but laced with thinly veiled disdain. "I understand there's been a little misunderstanding. Unfortunately, the restaurant is fully booked tonight. Perhaps I can recommend another place that may be more in line with your preferences." Camille didn't react, aside from a brief glance at her watch. 4 minutes left, she replied softly. "I had a reservation for 8 p.m. under the name Camille." Gerald turned to Ethan, who subtly shook his head, silently confirming there was no such name in the system. Camille watched the performance unfold, as though witnessing a rerun of an old tape. The rehearsed expressions, the refined vocabulary masking exclusion. At Table 9, Talia Chen's live stream had passed 1,200 viewers. Comments flooded the screen. "What restaurant is this? It's 2025, for God's sake. Call Channel 7 News." The hashtag @Elowen's Table Racism was now trending across Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. Food bloggers were sharing clips by the minute. Camille lifted her chin, her gaze meeting Gerald's head on. "I'll ask one last time. Do you intend to honor the confirmed reservation or not?" Gerald smirked, his arrogance no longer hidden. "I've been in this business for 25 years, ma'am. I know who my customers are, and this restaurant caters to a very specific kind of clientele." His final sentence rang out like a confession. The entire room fell into stunned silence. Ethan whispered, "Call security." Through the glass, 2 uniformed security guards entered. Mike Nolan, bald, headed with a cold stare, hand resting on his radio. Behind him was Marcus Hill, his young face etched with visible discomfort. "Ma'am," Mike said, "we're going to have to ask you to leave the premises." Camille looked at both men, her eyes settling on Marcus. Her gaze made him hesitate. "Marcus Hill," she said aloud, reading his name tag. "How long have you been working here?" Marcus hesitated. 6 months, ma'am. "Do you like your job?" "Mostly, yes. But something like today." Marcus trailed off, unable to finish. 4 minutes. Camille announced softly. That's insane, Lacey hissed from behind the reception desk, her voice sharp enough for the entire room to hear. Why are we still dealing with this woman? Just throw her out already. The tension in the air had now thickened into something tangible, felt in every glance and every breath. At table 8, a businessman began recording on his phone without trying to hide it. A food columnist from New York Magazine looked up from her notes, her expression shifting. She knew she was witnessing the scandal of the year. Gerald's voice dropped low, masking his rising anger behind a thin layer of professionalism. Mike Marcus, escort her out immediately. Use force if necessary. That phrase, use force if necessary, rang out like a sentence, captured in sharp detail by countless phones and the restaurant's own security cameras. To physically remove a well-dressed woman who had quietly insisted on her rightful reservation? Gerald had just crossed a line he could never step back from. Camille glanced at her watch. 8:07 p.m. 3 minutes remaining. She reached into her handbag as her phone vibrated gently. On the other end, a calm, deep voice spoke. Camille here. Preliminary review is complete. Execution approved. She gave a subtle nod, ended the call, then looked up and declared with quiet certainty, Proceed with the acquisition. Gerald laughed out loud. Acquisition? You think this is what? Buying a bag of chips at the store? Ethan joined in, chuckling, while Lacey leaned back against the counter, her face smeared with open disdain. Camille offered no response. She simply slipped her phone away, her gaze turning toward the entrance. The black Escalade idling outside blinked its tail lights once. The door opened. A man in a tailored Tom Ford suit stepped out, carrying a glossy black briefcase bearing the insignia of Warren and Holbrook, one of the top M&A law firms in New York. James Bennett strode forward with the piercing confidence of someone accustomed to closing $100 million deals. He handed Camille a leather-bound document folder. The agreement has been signed, sealed, and filed with the New York State Department of Commerce as of 8:05 p.m. The transfer of ownership is official. We are now the lawful proprietors. From inside the restaurant, Gerald looked out the window. His stare began to falter. Ethan frowned. What the hell is going on? Camille opened the folder, revealing the final page. Notary seal, signatures, time stamps, everything completed before she had even left the restaurant. She smiled. The countdown is over, Gerald, Camille said, her voice now clear and resolute, like the sound of a bell marking the collapse of a regime. You have exactly 30 minutes to collect your things and vacate the premises. No one in the restaurant moved. Not a single fork clinked. Not a single chair shifted. All sound vanished, leaving only the hum of the air conditioner, like the final breath of a system that had just been handed its death sentence. Camille walked straight to the front desk, the very spot where her reservation slip had been torn up exactly 20 minutes earlier, and placed a business card down. Beneath the warm golden lights, the embossed lettering came into focus. Camille Duval, CEO, Duval Hospitality Group. Lacey froze. Her mouth opened to say something, then closed again, like a fish out of water, completely powerless against the moment. But you're black, Lacey stammered. Camille gave a slight nod, replying in a low voice. And I also happen to own 47 restaurants across the Northeast. As of tonight, this is number 48. Ethan instinctively stepped back, as though standing in front of something volatile. Gerald remained frozen, his face twitching, reddening with fury. James Bennett opened his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. On the screen was the signed transfer agreement, complete with seals, signatures, and proof of wire. The sum of $4.7 million had cleared at exactly 8:07 p.m. "This can't be," Gerald exhaled, as if trying to wake himself from a nightmare. "Marcus," Camille turned to the young security guard, "as of this moment, you are the new head of security for this restaurant. Starting salary, $65,000 per year, with full benefits." Marcus stood speechless, mouth open. I don't understand." "You showed respect when others showed bias," Camille answered softly, "and that deserves to be rewarded." She turned to Mike, the man who had ordered her removal just minutes earlier. "You are suspended immediately, pending review of your violation of basic human rights in customer service." Mike turned pale. You can't. She can," James interrupted. "As the legal owner, she has full authority over personnel management and disciplinary action." At table 12, Talia Chen held her breath as her live stream surpassed 3,000 viewers. The comments scrolled rapidly, and screenshots of Camille's business card were already spreading across Twitter and TikTok. Gerald snatched the tablet from James's hands, flipping through the pages, his eyes landing on the account number, transaction ID, and digital tax filings, every single detail legally airtight. "This is a setup, a trap," he stammered. "A revenge plot." Camille unlocked her phone and displayed her personal Goldman Sachs account. The figure was large enough to silence any remaining doubt. "This isn't revenge, Gerald," she said, her gaze as cold as steel. "This is business." She extended her hand toward the space around them, the empty tables, the stunned customers, the cameras capturing every second. "You lost this place $1.1 million a year because you let prejudice, not competence, shape the service. And now I've changed that." Camille turned to face Ethan and Lacey directly, two faces now pale and visibly panicked. She pulled a neatly printed set of documents from the leather case James had handed her, and placed each one on the front desk, each sheet marking the dismantling of an outdated system they once leaned on with confidence. "Ethan Moore," she said clearly and decisively, "your position as assistant manager is terminated effective immediately." Ethan opened his mouth to object, but Camille cut him off. "For discriminatory behavior and the use of prejudiced language toward a customer, all fully documented via live stream, security footage, and multiple witnesses. Lacey Foster," she turned to the receptionist, "you are also dismissed for stating we don't serve people like you." Lacey shouted, "You're discriminating against white people. You're firing us just because we're white." Camille didn't blink. "I'm firing you for your actions, not your skin color. And those actions directly violate every principle of hospitality and the law," James added, gently but precisely. "Every statement made tonight is in violation of Title II of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Both of you were recorded refusing service based on discriminatory reasoning. We have more than enough evidence to uphold these terminations in any court." The restaurant remained silent. From bartenders to servers at the far end of the hall, no one could maintain their indifference. Those who once stood aside now realized things had changed beyond reversal. Camille turned to address the rest of the staff. "All remaining employees will be reassessed over the next 48 hours, she said loudly, every word striking with intention. Anyone who demonstrates a commitment to fair service and respect for every customer will be retained, retrained, and given a raise. A young line cook near the kitchen clapped first. A frizzy-haired server behind the bar joined in. Applause spread from one group to the next. Even the diners began to join in. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted quickly, from tense and skeptical to something lighter, filled with hope. Gerald still stood frozen, unmoving. "You have 30 minutes to collect your belongings and vacate the premises," James repeated, this time with a tone as formal as a final ruling. "The entire process has been recorded by security cameras and dozens of live streams." Camille nodded to Marcus, now officially the head of security. "Marcus, you'll oversee the handover. Make sure it's handled with order and respect." Marcus squared his shoulders and stood tall. "Understood, ma'am." Camille looked out over the restaurant. "Tonight we begin again." 6 weeks after that fateful night, Camille Duval walked into the restaurant like any ordinary guest. But the space had completely transformed. It wasn't just the new artwork on the walls. Paintings by local artists reflecting the cultural diversity of Manhattan. It wasn't just the redesigned menu, where French-style beef shared space with Puerto Rican chicken and rice. It was the atmosphere. A warmth filled the air, a sense of welcome, no longer tainted by the invisible tension Camille once breathed the night she was humiliated. Kesha, the black woman who used to be a server, now stood at the front desk as the new maitre d'. She beamed. "Good evening, Ms. Camille. Your table is ready." Camille nodded with gratitude, her eyes sweeping the room. At table 12, the very spot where Talia Chen had live-streamed the incident, a brown-skinned family was celebrating their grandmother's birthday. The elder smiled brightly in the candlelight, surrounded by 3 generations. Nearby, an Asian and Latinx couple toasted their glasses. A few tables over, a group of white business professionals discussed real estate investments. Marcus, now head of security, approached with confidence. "Evening, Miss Camille. Everything running smoothly?" "Perfect," she replied. "I've never seen guests this happy." He nodded and stepped quietly back to his post. Camille opened the menu, her fingers gliding over the new dishes crafted by a kitchen team that now included chefs from Haiti, Colombia, and Vietnam. It wasn't just a restaurant menu. It was a menu of a city, of a community. A message from James lit up her phone screen. "Revenue up 34% this month. Staff retention holding at 96%. The numbers spoke not only of profit, they spoke of the value of inclusion, even when it isn't easy. When dessert arrived, a chocolate cake prepared by Chef Jean-Claude, Camille noticed a familiar figure sitting at the bar. Gerald Whitmore. Alone. A glass of untouched whiskey before him. She walked over calmly, stopping in front of him. "Mr. Gerald?" He looked up, eyes clouded with confusion and remorse. "You won." Camille shook her head. "This wasn't my victory. It belongs to those who were once turned away, to those who finally found a place where they're treated with dignity." She placed a business card in front of him, not her own, but from a professional training center specializing in diversity and inclusion. "If you want to start over, they can help." He looked up, genuinely moved. "Why would you help me after everything?" "Because anyone can change," Camille said, "if they're willing." She returned to her table, where her family was just arriving. Her mother, her younger brother, her niece. People who had once been excluded were now dining at the very place that once rejected them, not out of revenge, but because they deserved to belong. That restaurant, once a symbol of exclusion, had become a beacon of new beginnings. Camille Duval's story is not just a response to a night of discrimination. It is proof that in modern business, dignity and inclusion are not merely moral values, but powerful strategies for leadership. She did not destroy a restaurant. She reinvented it, transforming prejudice into opportunity and turning a place that once rejected people into a space of hope. If you believe that respect should never depend on skin color or the size of a wallet, be sure to like and subscribe to help us spread more inspiring stories like this one. And don't forget to leave a comment with the words, "Serve with dignity," because only when everyone is truly welcomed can the service industry truly thrive.